Dirk Engelbrecht van Wildserve kuier vanoggend in die ateljee om oor die werk wat hulle doen te gesels en hy vertel ons van sy noue ontkoming toe hy onlangs 'n nag in 'n boom spandeer het. So good morning Dirk and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for the invite.
Now, how and when did your love for animals start exactly? Let's just go back to that.
I think I've been lucky with the way, obviously the way we were raised. You know, it's got to be seeded very early in life. So I can't think back to a time where I didn't. You know, I was the kind of kid that would we were raised as, you know, our pets were part of our family. So I think it started there. I didn't have a lot of exposure as a small child, growing up in central Johannesburg. You know, so I was quite fascinated when I got an opportunity. I'd say probably in my early 20s, mid 20s, where I started looking for opportunities. You know, to actually get more exposure, and then realised that at that point in time, if you're going to volunteer and get a lot of exposure, you probably have to travel. You know, there's a lot of big projects and programs advertised all over the world. I did struggle to find something in South Africa, and then luckily, not far away from where I was living in North Riding, in Paulshof, Sandton, there was an organisation called Free Me Wildlife. So I applied there, got very impatient, you know, because I missed opportunities overseas. You know, you had to pay a lot of dollars to go work overseas. And then I thought, you know what, if it's local in South Africa and we're helping, you know, that should be done with open arms. And there just weren't many opportunities like that. There's a lot of organisations that will take volunteers, but they'll administrate it from overseas. So you apply to an American company to work in South Africa to volunteer.
Yes.
And then I found Free Me Wildlife and started volunteering there, and we start at the bottom. You start cleaning the cages.
Wow.
But what do you do for a living? I'm just curious.
It's full time. So
It's full time.
There aren't many that do it. So it's not like a formal vocation where people can say, look, when I grow up, I want to be a wildlife rescuer. You know, it's generally very informal. But what it's required is a lot of dedication, a lot of time. You've got to be available all the time. There's no continuation. You know, there's just it's good in a way. There's a lot of public that get involved. But I've gone from the mailroom up. So I've gone from working, cleaning cages into learning about animal husbandry, managing the animals, the enclosures, the centre management. So I went through supervisory positions, managing to director. So, and then back down again. Because once you get up to the top, you're sitting behind a desk. That's not quite what you want to do.
That's not what you want to do, yeah.
So as soon as I hit the upper echelons of the organisations, I actually just went back down into the field. And it becomes a full-time job. Yeah, definitely has to be.
And now background regarding Wildserve exactly.
Okay, Wildserve, I think, was formed out of necessity. So unfortunately, I resigned my position as a director. Obviously, we have a term. That was in about 2015, and I went back to business. You know, so I had my own business, did a lot of consulting work, technical consulting and that, and I think I just missed it too much. You know, so already in the back of your mind, you're almost hoping, you know, I wish I could go back. You know, how am I going to fit this in again? But you're trying to start up a business again, and so I did a 1-year contract, and then I found out that there was more need. You know, there was an escalation, there was an increase all the time. Unfortunately, things were getting worse for wildlife in the urban environment. And having worked in the industry, you kind of understand everything. If someone says, look, there's a problem, you kind of understand the background issues and that. So I contacted a lot of former colleagues, and we started Wildserve to fill gaps. So mainly what we do is we do what other orgs don't do. We just pick up the slack, fill in the gaps. And I think it's important, you know, once you've seen the whole picture, you almost feel you've got a responsibility. And you know where the gaps are, you can identify them and you can fill them.
What's some of the main challenges regarding like wild creatures, and what do you do?
I think there's not a lot of awareness. There's awareness of wildlife in the urban environment, which is great. There's a lot of people that care. But I think maybe it might even be educational from almost a curriculum basis, you know, and the format that people are educated in. It's kind of just touched on very lightly. And then when you're doing secondary and tertiary education and that kind of thing, I think it's too specialised. And in South Africa, the focus is on, you know, it's the bush, it's the ecotourism, it's, you know, we are that kind of continent. But people forget, we're also the hub of Africa. You know, hub of South Africa is Johannesburg. So you narrow it right down, you're sitting in a mega city, but it's a mega biodiverse country. So you've got to address those issues. You've got to preserve the wildlife in the urban environment as well. They don't know different. They will always gravitate to where they can find habitat, and they will move and they will disperse. But also there's animals that adapt to the urban environment very well. So we call them adapter or exploiter species, and they actually need people. They learn to actually realize it's good for them. So now, unfortunately, it's quite sad. They'll be coming into the city wanting to be there, and we're not really accommodating them. You know, so we kind of just very egocentric, very central focused on how we will develop, how we will build, and what the priorities are. And unfortunately, we got the social qualms as well. So we have poverty, we have strife, and that kind of thing as well. And we understand that's a priority as well. It's got to be. You know, people aren't going to focus on leisure and ecotourism and conservation and that if they have problems at home. They don't have a roof over their head, they don't have a meal to eat. It's very hard to focus on those kind of things. So a role that Wildserve has filled, which has really evolved into what we call human-wildlife coexistence. So it's a balance. And it's very much a balance. So we don't exclude either side. We're not bunny huggers. You know, we don't have a super focus on wildlife and nothing else matters. It's quite complex.
But how and in what way can the public contribute, and where can people find more information?
Look, I'm living proof, obviously, of the fact that you can contribute hands-on. You can definitely get involved. You know, I think a lot of people are still surprised. So I will admit, from our point of view, you know, you feel guilty, but there's such a lot of work to do that, and such little resources. Again, people will feel that if you're a non-profit organisation, the government's funding you. There is money, corporates are interested, overseas companies are sending you money all the time. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so it's very difficult out there. There's always more work than you can cover anyway. So it is very stressful. So the people can get involved hands-on. They don't always know that, but they always just contact a non-profit organisation, a conservation organisation. Let them know you're interested. They'll always take help in some role. You know, we start from people that drive around collecting cases from vets. So it's literally just collecting a carry box and transporting it for us. And that saves us having to go out and get wrapped up with those kind of tasks where we can get down to the emergencies, where we've got to rescue the cases and that kind of thing. Then obviously financially, you know, we're an organisation that also understands very well how to explain and position it with people as to what the value is. You know, there is a return on investment. You know, it's the foundation of life. People forget that we live on Earth. Earth has systems, it needs to survive, or else we don't survive. And they're complex systems. So if you're contributing, you're gaining. You're always going to be gaining.
Right. So jy kan ingeskakel bly want ons gaan nou by Dirk uitvind hierna hoe dit voel om 20 ure deur water meer gesleep te word en dan hou jy in 'n boom vas. En dit is so surreal vir my om te sê hy sit hier op die bank. Ek het hom in die koerant gesien verlede week en is net dankbaar hy's nog hier. So bly ingeskakel daarvoor.
Ons gaan nou voort met vanoggend se gesprek met Dirk Engelbrecht van Wildserve, wat vanoggend in die ateljee kuier om oor die werk wat hulle doen te gesels, en dan gaan hy ons nou vertel van sy noue ontkoming toe hy onlangs 'n nag in 'n boom spandeer het. So thanks again for joining us and for being here.
Okay.
Now I want you to tell us about the recent event and experience at the Val Dam, the so-called Hell's Corner, and what exactly happened that day.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously we were there for a conservation project. A lot of people from the area, the residents, had notified us that from their experience, when the water gets a certain level, it will be washing away a lot of the wildlife. Obviously, a lot of babies, a lot of eggs will be lost. So people have asked, they said, but there's a lot of birds, for example, you know, it's of a species that occur elsewhere, but they need to understand there's conservation principles to it as well. So, for example, it's generations that are lost. It's groups of animals differ slightly geographically as well. So it's important in that area that the components of that ecosystem are kept going, else everything changes. You take out the one species of birds, other things start to change as well. So it's important to the area. And obviously when the people ask you, you're obviously going to respond, even if it's from a welfare point of view. You don't want people to witness that kind of destruction. So they're going to call conservation specialists to come in and help with that. A lot of questions have arisen with, you know, how professional were the paddlers that were there and that kind of thing. So we're as good as we can be, you know, as specialist conservationists. And also a lot of planning was done beforehand. It's not that we just go out and we're out there hyper-focused on the birds. We want to get them down at any cost. So it's important to us to protect the people that do it, because the people that do it don't just do that project.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got tens of thousands of animals to rescue each. So we were very, very careful with our people. And we did a lot of research. We invited a lot of the local people. Okay, so a lot of organizations, a lot of the local people that are very well versed with the river itself, and over many years, the paddling clubs, okay, so the Gauteng Canoe Union, we communicated with them and they said we'll send specialists from the area. So we had whitewater specialists, we had people that know that the river, they mapped it to us, they explained everything to us. And in some of the photos that were shared, you could see in the beginning it was very calm. Okay? But it becomes unpredictable. Okay, and I think it becomes unpredictable for anybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so we were there as three organisations that often work together. It's the South African Wildlife Rehabilitation Centre that has its headquarters in Springs. Then we have the Owl Rescue Centre, who are in Hartbeespoort, and then I was contacted for Wildserve to contribute as well. So it's a very strong team, each with their strengths. Okay, and then we started clearing the first island, which was by the Willow Creek Estate. There was zero incident there. I mean, it was totally calm. It was like being on a normal lake, almost like you're fishing and that kind of thing. It's almost leisurely. And we took out the brunt of the animals there. After that, once we'd finished at about 12 o'clock, and we were forewarned, and there was no way to prevent it. We had to work through it, but there was no change. There was no change in the environment, really. So we had a sluice gate open at 9 o'clock. We actually started at about 9. 9 o'clock, a sluice gate was opened, and 11 o'clock, a sluice gate was opened. And we finished at about 12. Okay, so it wasn't a matter of things got very scary very quickly. Okay, it was a progressive thing as well through the day, and obviously this has been going on for a few days or a few weeks with the dams level building up. So when we finished there, a lot of the people had to now transport the animals. So we got to prepare the animals for transport the animals, and get them off to care because now they're stressed animals. Okay, they're stressed. They may be cold. They're out of nest. They're away from their parents. You make provision, there might be an injury, an unfortunate event, but there wasn't. There was none of that. So we had to get the eggs out, which also need to be kept warm. We had to get the babies out, and they went off to Krugersdorp, and they went off to Springs. We split them, eggs to Krugersdorp. And then myself and Brendan Murray and Danelle Murray from our rescue centre discussed finding the other islands, because we discussed it with the locals, and they said, look, as far as they know, there are multiple other islands, but they know of 2 others that have a similar scenario. So we then drove 10 kilometres upstream, and launched from there, and then came downstream to investigate the islands. So that's how we proceeded, and up until there it was calm, and we were taking photos. You know, I joke with people. I say, you know what, I was actually literally just reversed facing the other kayak, and we were having conversation. You know, and they paused for a moment to take a few photos of the banks, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go up ahead in the meantime. Okay, they had cameras with them, which unfortunately they had their own incident. People don't always know that. It almost seems to be 2 separate stories. So they also had a bit of an incident. So I went up ahead and got to the first group of islands, and it's a strange thing to see. It's almost like bowling lanes. There's almost 3 different types of water, and they're clearly separated. Yeah. Okay, so there's a smooth, medium moving water, which you can actually just row down, or not even paddle if you don't want to. And then there's a very choppy ocean type water in the middle. And then on the right-hand side, you see the rapids. Yep. Okay. So we avoided all the risks. Okay. We would get out by the weirs, we'd get onto the bank, we'd walk around it, we'd get back in, and we'd be very careful, which is evident. No one got hurt. Okay. There were incidences and that kind of thing, 1 or 2, but in the end of the day, no one got hurt. Okay. I like to describe what happened to me as much as it, you know, when you're there, you don't think of it that way. Yeah. But ultimately, I got stuck. I needed help, and I needed professional help for where I was. So then I got drawn into the rapids after I had capsized, which is kind of like standard practice. You know, in the choppy water, you capsize, you don't think anything of it. You get your equipment out, you're busy putting it back on, you get your oar back on, and it was just the timing. Hell's Corner, I think that's what catches you. It's kind of you only got X amount of time to correct yourself. You know, get back on the kayak, get everything in order, and then start paddling off again. And I got, in that time, unfortunately, I started getting drawn into the rapid on Hell's Corner, of all places.
Split second.
It did. So it was very quick after that, because the water, it's almost like a conveyor belt. Once you hit the water, you're off at a tangent and you're going. Yeah. So that's exactly what happened. So by the time I got everything ready, I felt the draw, and I started paddling, and it wasn't fast enough, and I got drawn off into a tree line, and then impacted with a tree. So what I did was I just rolled on the kayak impacted with a tree, and it's still there, exactly in that position. So the water's holding it there, it's still there. Okay, so people said to me, is the kayak, can we go collect it? I said, it's safe. Promise it's safe, no one can go there. No one's going to go there.
Just leave it, it's fine.
Read the papers, you don't want to go there. That kayak is as safe as houses, as they say. So, and then from there, I went under the kayak, because obviously I'm off the kayak now, and the rapids caught me, and I was grabbing for branches to try to stay. You know, you want to stay with your equipment, stay with the kayak. It's your best chance out of there. You're not going to get out there swimming, really. It's going to be very difficult. And I went into almost as I'd call it, the gallery of rapids. So it's almost like a convergence, different directions of current. And I managed to grab, the branches I grabbed onto broke. You know, so automatically now you start, there's a bit of panic sets in. You're underwater, it's in slow motion almost. Yeah. You're trying to grab for things and you're feeling, you know, you'd have security if you could grab on. And I pushed through, and then about 12, 15 meters down, I managed to grab onto a tree, luckily, a bit of something firm. And I got up on that tree, still had the oar in my hand, somehow, had the oar in my hand. You know, I kept everything, always look after all our equipment, and managed to get that locked up somewhere, a wedge somewhere, and then got onto, you know, got slightly out of the water. So then from there you're going to start planning. A lot of people have said to me, did you panic? What happened? How bad was it? How fast? I think people forget we deal with emergency situations. Okay, so you kind of bridge. You know, when you get out there, you're saying, you know what, I've got a problem. It's always dynamic. It's always unpredictable. There's no fixed equipment for what we do. Every scenario is different. Every animal case is different. Every species and its problems are different. So when you get there, you just go into that kind of mode. You know, and you start looking for solutions. Because it's often life and death for someone else, for the animals. So now it's life and death for me, and I'm going, well, you know what? I'm just going to do the same thing.
And they said, you know, after a couple of hours, they said, listen, I don't think we're going to look for somebody alive, because that's a reality of the danger and the force of this water.
Yes.
You know? So they were surprised after 20 hours. Yeah. That's a long time.
Yeah. So look, you know,
was it your longest 20 hours ever?
Definitely, definitely. Like, I mean, every hour felt like 4 hours. Yeah. You know, you're trying to look at conventional things and you're trying to read it and say, look. I mean, at one point I was thinking, you know, well, how long until sunrise?
And you had to stay awake as well.
Staying awake was hard because I was lacking a lot of sleep. I think I've got colleagues that work for decades, sleeping 20 hours, working 20 hours a day, sleeping 4 hours, and that's waking up maybe every hour, every 2 hours through the night to care for animals, because we've got nocturnal animals and you've got to wake up. Wow. So I don't even have. I'm not even. It's not even that intense for me. But I had the old Year's, New Year's issue with domestic animals that I'd assisted, because I was on the road anyway for wildlife and the dangers to them. And one of the and some of the welfare colleagues were short-staffed. Okay, COVID actually had an effect on them, sadly as well. So there's another problem, something to blame COVID for. But so I offered to be out on the road for domestics as well, with the fireworks and all that kind of thing as well.
Were you sitting or standing with this tree? I mean, your physical position was standing on a piece of this tree.
There was an article that said, and I thought to myself, you know what, that's. I mean, I'm not the kind of person that goes, you know what, it was really bad, guys. Let me embellish a little bit. Let me make it dramatic. You know, I'm not like I'm not a very dramatic person. So, and the article said that I was on an island a meter from the banks.
That's amazing.
So I thought, you know, I can picture that. You know, palm tree, pina colada maybe.
It
was the wedge of a tree. So as big as a wedge can be, you know, the view of a tree, and I had my foot on there. And I had one small branch to hold on to. And as I grabbed it, it actually snapped off. So I had the stub of it, and I was holding onto that and standing on the fork of the tree, but a foot out the water as well. Yeah. So that was as far as I could get out on that tree.
And now we've read something about U2 songs. So the question is, which U2 songs did you sing? And was Where the Streets Have No Name one of them?
It was.
Okay.
It was. And I think at a certain point in time, once I'd gauged everything, I realized things weren't changing that fast, because I'm gauging to say how fast the water level rising. You know, so I was trying to be practical. I need to gauge little markers to see, because I've only got a foot to play with. So I need to see somewhere else if the water's coming up. So I've got forewarning as to what I need to do. So I was grinning at myself when that exact song came to mind as well, and I'm going, you know, these are like streets, and they definitely don't have a name. You know, they're unpredictable. They're not always here, and they are like roads coming in, converging. So it was one of the songs. At that point in time, you know, it wasn't so much about like singing to calm myself. It became about the sleep aspect. So I was vocalizing, like I said to people, I was just vocalizing, and I noticed that actually keeps you awake.
Yeah. Talk to yourself, sing.
So you know, I think whether you're a truck driver driving, you know, that kind of thing on the roads late at night, you come back from a holiday, if you have to talk to the person next to you, talk to yourself if you have to, phone somebody maybe even. It's just a quirk, but it definitely works. And I started with, you know, almost like having a meeting. Not that I definitely didn't feel like I was crazy. I just thought, you know, just vocalize things that you'd been working on the day, and as though you're talking to someone. And then I started singing after that, and it was just anything to vocalize. You know, after a while, I think with 6 hours to go, at that point in time, I was just spitting out nouns. You know, anything I could see, I was playing almost I Spy. You know, leaf, tree, branch, water, and that kept me going. But I dozed off about 40 times. Micro, little
And it's so
micro
scary
sleeps.
because, I mean, that's where you could have ended. The other song I thought of when you mentioned you two were stuck in a moment and I can't get out of it.
Yeah.
You
It's
know?
one of my favorites as well.
Yeah, I can believe it.
So I probably dozed off before I got to it, and then just like reset. Because what happens is I've explained it as when you do doze off, you know, you might be sitting in an uncomfortable position and it's late at night or whatever the situation is, and you doze off. But the jolt, that little jolt that you get, you can times that by 50. Because by the time you wake up, you're actually slightly angry with yourself. That's when you actually get worried. You get very worried because you're going, you know what, that could have been it.
Well,
You know?
we wish we had more time with you, and I'm sure that I'm speaking on behalf of everyone when saying you are a true hero, and a friend of animals is a friend of us as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, die groot ontbyt. So thank you so much
Really
for
happy to hear that.
sharing
Thanks,
your
Dirk.
story this morning.
It's a pleasure.
Ja nee, kyk, ons is baie dankbaar Dirk is nog saam met ons in die werk wat
Ja.
ons gaan doen. So gaan lees ook sommer sy storie, jy gaan maar op Netwerk 24.